Hi everybody, my name's Andrew and today I'm driving a Hyundai Elantra N. Last year, as some of you may know, I came very close to buying a Veloster N, and this in theory takes all the hilarity of that car and turns the otherwise boring Elantra rental car into an excellent performance vehicle. But in usual fashion, one that is somehow still quite flawed, and yet I absolutely adore it. So in this video, I'm going to give you guys a quick walk around of it and take it for a test drive and tell you what I think. What Hyundai has created here is potentially the best value sports sedan on the market these days. For one thing, under this hood you'll find a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, just as you would in a Golf GTI or Jetta GLI or any number of others, but one that is significantly more powerful for the money. The horsepower figure of this car is actually shared with the Veloster N, which makes sense because it's the same motor, but thanks to a bigger turbo, produces significantly more torque in this application. In stock form, the Elantra N puts out 276 horsepower, which is a 15% increase over a Mark 8 GTI, and torque only comes in at 289, but that's still a 6% bump, which isn't as much, but it's still something. It also sounds absolutely fantastic. If you don't know or haven't seen the Reddit story, this car is so loud in stock form that it has actually gotten owners in trouble with the police because they think it's modified, and actually even gotten people state refed in California. I mean, I know that's California, but still, it's that loud. Take a listen. Compared to most VW and Honda offerings, where the majority of casual onlookers wouldn't be able to tell the regular car from the performance version, this Elantra N certainly stands out. While I do love the white, black, red color scheme, personally I think a darker color such as black or gray would help hide this front end and grille a little bit more, which I'm not really a big fan of. I think the side profile and rear 3/4 are by far the best angles of this car. The front end isn't bad, but it's just not really my favorite. And like I said before, the whole car does certainly stand out no matter what. Of course, you'll hear it long before you see it, but when you do see it, you will notice it again as well. Inside, the N is also noticeably different to your typical Hertz or Enterprise spec Elantra sedan. The biggest change by far is these seats, and while they're gorgeous, don't get me wrong, they have a nice mix of leather with blue stitching and some patterned Alcantara, and they even feature light-up N logos on the backrests. I just don't really understand the point of them. I get that they're fully manually adjustable for a little bit of weight savings, right? But in the same vein as the Audi RS3 I reviewed last year and complained about this there as well, this is still a 3,500 pound car, right? This is not a Miata. What are you actually gaining from these seats? A little more adjustment certainly wouldn't go amiss. Either way, these seats are still pretty comfortable, so I really can't complain about them too much. As you can probably see from this angle, they have an excellent level of bolstering both on the sides and on the bottom, but not to the point where ingress and egress is too difficult. They are still pretty livable. Overall, the rest of the interior is visually very attractive. Of course, with every car in this segment and price category, there are still going to be some cheaper touch points. There ultimately have to be. For one thing, this grab handle and bar right here is super hard plastic and actually flexes quite a bit when I do that. That's not very much force, by the way. The screens, the digital gauge cluster and infotainment screen, are both a nice size, and unfortunately, as with most non-Volkswagen products, frankly, the digital gauge cluster is not super customizable, although it is attractive and works perfectly fine. You can really only change the part in the center there, which, again, kind of defeats the point of a screen, but, like I said, is still nice to look at. As are the steering wheel, shifter, and door cards. Of course, this is the same steering wheel as the Veloster N, and as such features the light blue and red buttons, as well as perforated leather on the sides and silver paddles on the back. The shifter is also perforated with blue stitching, just like the seats, and the door panels feature the same patterned Alcantara as the seats as well. The rear seats of the N are just as nice as the front and equally visually fancy. Unfortunately though, in the name of cost cutting, it's lacking air vents back here and really any other amenities, frankly. That is slightly made up for though by the fact that at 38 inches of rear legroom, the Elantra is one of the biggest back seats in this class, as well as offering a trunk that is not any bigger, but just on par with all of its rivals. Of course, the rear seat backs fold down, although unfortunately not in a 60-40 split configuration, but upon doing so, you discover the giant red triangular bracing that lives behind them. While this does look super cool and of course provides extra stiffness and rigidity to the N, it also severely limits practicality. I'm told that you can remove this assembly if you really need to, but I mean, who really wants to go through the hassle of that every time you have to stick something big through the back? I think you know where this is going. Oh my God, this thing sounds so good. Okay, we'll come back to the noise in just a minute because I actually want to keep talking about stiffness for just a second. Because on the subject of stiffness, Hyundai claims that the N is roughly 29% stiffer than the regular Elantra in terms of torsional rigidity. That figure comes from a few things: modified underbody mounting points, an exhaust tunnel brace, of course that bracing in the back that you can see in the back of shot, and a new strut ring, which basically just adds extra reinforcement on the top of the strut towers. While I haven't driven any other Elantra of this generation, actually, I certainly can't argue with the fact that the N is stiff and rigid in just about every way possible. It feels really good, honestly. I mean, I'm not even on a back road right now. I'm just kind of in traffic, to be honest with you. And it feels phenomenal. The N versus the regular car gets adaptive dampers, larger front brakes, 14-inch rotors up front, 19-inch wheels with stickier tires from the factory, a tighter steering ratio, a different front axle. The list goes on and on. There are a number of performance changes to this car. Oh, and one other thing that I almost forgot about is the rather stupidly named N corner carving electronic limited slip differential, or basically just an LSD for those that aren't familiar. That's a dumb name, almost as dumb as Mercedes' Magic Vision Control, which is basically just putting washer jets in the wiper blades. But I must say that going around corners, or exiting corners rather, the N does carve very well. I mean, I just took that 90-degree corner at like 35 miles an hour. And it's just, oh my God, it's just so good. This is exactly what happened when I filmed the RS3 last year, is I was just so overwhelmed by the hilarity and the fun and just the goodness of the car that I was starting to not make sense anymore, which doesn't happen very often for me. So let's just get back to reality a little bit. We've got a stop sign here. I'm just going to pull away nice and gentle. And oh my word, it sounds so good on every single shift. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, this car makes the same power but more torque than the Veloster N thanks to a bigger turbo, and is significantly more powerful than really all of the other competition at this price point. Yes, a Golf R makes more power, but also costs significantly more. A GTI, a GLI, Civic Si, those types of things, they cost the same or maybe slightly less than this car, but for comparison, a stock Mark 8 GTI that I'm driving this weekend makes 240 horsepower, whereas this is basically 280 and almost 290 foot-pounds of torque. Same thing with the Civic Type R. Again, Civic Type R beats this in power, but good luck finding a Civic Type R for 35 grand like this car. I mean, the new ones are 50 plus, and even the previous generation are still in the 40s. So that really just kind of goes to show that, oh my God, the pops. This is, just for reference, this is in sport mode, ESC Sport, and so the exhaust valve is open, and in full N mode, which is adds a little bit more burbles, I'm told, over regular sport. I must say, more pops, when pushing on a bit, the differential, despite its name being kind of silly, is actually pretty accurate. This thing does carve corners very well. I mean, there's tons of grip, which is also partially helped by the 245 section tires, which are, I think, the widest in the segment, if I'm correct. And no real discernible understeer, and only a little bit of torque steer on corner exit acceleration. But Hyundai actually says that's a feature, not a flaw, apparently. Albert Bierman, head of research and development for Hyundai Motor Group, has said that he wants the Elantra N to come alive in your hands without feeling like it's getting away from you, and thus a little bit of extra torque steer and a little bit of play has been engineered into the car. I'm gonna floor it again, but I'm gonna try to be serious this time. It gives you a shift noise, which I just noticed. So as I mentioned before, when you do give it some throttle, it is seriously quick, this thing. The manufacturer quoted 0 to 60 time of this car with the 8-speed dual clutch is 5.2 seconds, which honestly doesn't sound that quick, but as I've seen from instrumented testing from other publications, with launch control and the NGS mode, you can get under 5 in the high 4s pretty easily, which is basically a full second, almost a second and a half quicker than a stock GTI or other rivals. Speaking of this NGS button, there's a little red button on the steering wheel labeled NGS, right? Which stands for N Grin Shift, which is, much like the differential, kind of a silly name. Effectively, this button just gives you maximum boost for 20 seconds or so. And much like the differential, though, it does work. It certainly does work. It also gives you a little countdown timer here on the screen, which is kind of cool. So you can see exactly how long you have overboost for. Ultimately, the hilarity of this car is really what the Elantra N is all about. Because yes, a Golf GTI or Golf R is going to be way more practical than this car, but frankly also a bit more dull. And as we discussed previously, most of the rivals that are at the same power level as this and performance level are considerably more expensive, at least brand new. And yes, it's flawed, but so is every car in some way or another. Once you find yourself on a back road, you will just completely forget about the fact that you can't tilt the seats, or the fact that you have to uninstall part of the car every time you go to IKEA. Just, I really want one of these cars. I don't know what else to say. It's just really good. There's a nice M2 there, by the way. I really want an Elantra N. Well, that is until I have to inevitably put something in the back, of course. And with that, that's where I'm going to wrap this video up. Mostly, the driving part of this video was basically just me giggling to the camera the whole time, and I apologize for that. There wasn't really a whole lot of useful information in here, but again, that's really the whole point of this car. That hasn't happened since I drove a modified RS3 last year, and I think that speaks volumes for the character of this car. And again, I really want one. So, as always, if you enjoyed this video or found it informative in some way, probably more the beginning portion of the video rather than the end, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for plenty more content to come.